The High Court in Pretoria will this morning hear Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula's bid against the National Prosecuting Authority. Mapisa-Nqakula is fighting back against allegations of fraud and corruption. The standoff began last week following a raid at Mapisa-Nqakula's house in Johannesburg by the National Prosecuting Authority's investigating Directorate. To weigh in on this, let's now welcome a program head at the Public Service Accountability Monitor at Rhodes University, Zukiswa, Kota. Zukiswa, good morning. Thank you so much for making time for us. So yesterday, while watching visuals of the raid outside Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula's house, and also later on confirmation that indeed she is under investigation by the investigating Directorate, as somebody who is in this public accountability space, what first jumped at you?
Many things. But really the most immediate for us, as you say, in the public accountability space, was just the dire space in which, these circumstances then place Parliament as a whole. That the entire Speaker of the National Assembly is in this position to begin with is really, really concerning. So overarchingly, really, is that massive concern around the integrity of the National Assembly and rather of the Speaker.
The integrity of the Speaker, and by extension, I guess, the National Assembly as well. And as you've heard, the opposition a lot of the opposition parties actually calling for the Speaker to rather resign instead of taking on special leave. Your thoughts on that? And also perhaps maybe if you want to weigh in on this debate on whether the rules of Parliament do actually allow for the Speaker to take special leave.
On quite a sort of cursory look at the rules of the National Assembly and the sittings, and in terms of the leave categories that are permitted, it does seem to us that the Speaker and any Member of Parliament in this instance would be given the space, and there is a category, a category for special leave, which, as things stand, and again at a cursory look, provides the Minister, or rather the Speaker, space to take special leave days not exceeding 15 days. And in this instance, the Speaker's party would need to sign off on that leave. She'd need to put in an application, much like the rest of us for other categories of leave. Perhaps the question then is about the expected duration of this leave, which actually at present hasn't been outlined either in the statement that was issued by Parliament towards the end of last week, and certainly we haven't seen anything specifically indicating the length of time that the Speaker has been given to take special leave. But there is, at present, there is that outline in the rules of the National Assembly for special leave, which in fact also includes should a Member of Parliament need to appear in court. And that is provided for at present in the rules of the National Assembly. Yep.
So Lichisa Tinodi has now been appointed as the interim National Assembly Speaker. Are the rules of Parliament clear around how long you can have that position, having somebody who's not permanent in that position in an acting role?
Oh, that's a good question, Alden, and we'd need to take a closer look at that. But it would, in the interim, I think the rules do provide for the seconding of another Member of Parliament in such an instance, whether in the absence, for example, in a portfolio committee chairperson's absence or an ordinary MP's absence. So in this, again, I think the timeline is an important one. Perhaps again to look at the timeline, Parliament is left with not much time before this term of the 6th Parliament expires, which is around, midnight on the 22nd or late May, just before the elections begin. So that too maybe is worth considering, the time remaining for the actual sitting, the formal sittings of this current Parliament.
Yeah. Does the Speaker have a point in her argument that looking at the possible arrest, that arrest would, of course, as she says, lead to humiliation because there will be a mugshot of her, and all of this happening in a time as we head into the elections, and, of course, the position that she is in as the Speaker of the National Assembly, therefore the arrest itself shouldn't be carried out?
Yeah, Alden, I mean, that is quite a surprising take for particularly a Speaker of the National Assembly, someone who should really be in a position to protect the rule of law, to conform to the rule of law, to follow as any other person would be expected to, due process. So, it really is important in this instance when people are listening to the justifications, for instance, for interdicting investigations and so on. It's really important for people to listen what that means about accountability and the ways in which those who represent us see accountability and how they understand it. In this instance, we would really insist that the rule of law must take precedence, that due process must be followed, the NPA must be allowed to undertake their duties, and the important link between the NPA and the police service, the SAPS, is fundamental. And so there's absolutely no reason under the sun that anyone should be given a break. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter what role in parliament or otherwise, whether you are a high-standing politician or not. That before the law does not matter. And so the Speaker should really be understanding that. And one thing that's really worth considering as well is that we really shouldn't be making space in criminal procedure systems for the well-heeled, the well-resourced and wealthy people to undermine the rule of law, as we've seen many a time. So in this instance, it is a little bit infuriating for the Speaker perhaps to be seeming to undermine the Criminal Procedures Act.
Yeah, and ordinarily, again, if we compare the ordinary Joe Soap on the street and how their prosecutorial processes would be followed, for instance, the point that a lot of people have raised is that when it comes to the rich and powerful and influential people, you'd find that there's a conversation that be happening between the lawyers as well as the SAPS in terms of how the alleged perpetrator would be handing themselves over to the police. There is no arrest if they try to avoid an arrest as much as possible. What are some of the considerations that go into deciding whether or not you, one, arrest this particular individual, or you give the individual an opportunity to hand themselves over to the police? Because now in the letter that was sent to Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula's lawyers as well, the prosecutor there indicates already that as it stands, they just want her to hand herself over to the Littleton police station, and also they've made it clear that the state will not be opposing bail.
So amongst the things that, first of all, the prosecutor, on the NPA side, has to, there are 4 sort of key steps that are part of the process on deciding whether or not, to bring charges against someone. Amongst those, involves the police in terms of taking the investigation further. So the docket that is handed over, or rather the prosecutor that, the docket used by the prosecutor is what really is used to determine the extent to which, the deemed activities are illegal and should be, further investigated. The issue then of bail, and of course, as we know, the courts determine or grant, bail or not grant bail, and that's left up to the courts to decide. In this instance, one of the considerations, of course, is whether or not the person, is a flight risk, whether or not the person potentially poses harm to others, and so on. So, so that's another important, particularly in the case of a high-profile individual such as the Speaker is.
Okay. And let's quickly bring in politics to the conversation, Zukiswa. Just quickly listen to what President Cyril Ramaphosa had to say, speaking in his capacity, of course, as the ANC president while on the campaign trail in Gqeberha over the weekend. Take a listen to what he had to say about this case against the Speaker of the National Assembly.
As far as I'm concerned, the Speaker herself has said that she's cooperating. And that in itself must say something to all of us, that we are dealing here with allegations that have been made, with a Speaker who says she's cooperating, and from a governance point of view, she says, I'm going to take special leave, and the process must then unfold. It's already known that when it reaches a particular point, certain actions need to be taken. So there's no running away from that. So the matter is being handled, and let's give the institutions that are handling this matter the space to handle this matter. And I am certain that the rule of law and processes of handling things like this in our country will prevail.
Well, Zukiswa, on one end, of course, this is the leader of the ANC. It's the president of the ANC that we're speaking about here, who's also the president of the country and the head of one arm of the state. Just quickly speak to us about the complexities of all of this as people are calling on the National Assembly Speaker to resign. The ANC has already indicated in their statement last week that the ANC will enforce its integrity and step-aside policies based on the facts as they arise. And I guess as soon as she is charged, that step-aside policy of the ANC will kick in.
Yeah, I think from the political parties, aspects of things, the internal democracies of every party are probably really under, or should be under, high scrutiny as we speak, and in particular, of course, the African National Congress. And so the president's announcements, on the one hand, are a little bit encouraging, but you'll have noticed the language perhaps was a little bit on the vague side. I believe he said something to the effect of, once things reach a certain stage, certain things must happen. And so understandably, of course, there is no rushing processes, but it certainly is, if anything, a really important moment for any political party to show that their internal democracies and their internal party systems live up to what they say they do, if there was ever an important moment to do so. On the aspect then of the investigation and the process itself, one thing that I think many people are looking out for is that should, for instance, the investigation proceed and get to the point of, the courts, one thing that has been really important and has been distressing, I suppose, for many in the public has been that sometimes these cases are dismissed on technicalities. So one thing that we would really insist on is to ensure, on the one hand, that there, of course, is no interference in this process and in the investigation, but also that there isn't, that the process isn't rushed, and that it doesn't then get dismissed on technical grounds, as we have seen. And of course, the burden of proof in this instance is higher for criminal prosecutions than it would be, for instance, in a commission of inquiry. So a lot of really important things to consider. As you say, there are the political complexities of it, but from our perspective, from an accountability perspective, it really isn't complex. Let the law take its process. Ensure that what has been committed to in terms of political party accountability processes and mechanisms are followed through. The public is watching. And certainly from a governance perspective, there is no greater moment to show that the rule applies, or rather the law applies equally to all.
Well, certainly. Thank you so much for your time. And of course, Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula also arguing that the case is weak. She goes on to say that considering the raid that took place this past week, she believes that the investigation is not done with, so there is no case. But thank you so much for your time. That is a program head at a public service accountability monitor at Rhodes University, Zukiswa, Kota. And